Hi everyone, I'm Victoria Nece from the After Effects team, and I am here with three amazing VFX artists who also have something very cool in common, which is that they're not just great artists, they've all made a name for themselves within the VFX community. And so I'd like to welcome you all to the stage today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have Jayse Hansen, Mary Poplin, and Andrew Kramer. I'm going to do the little thing where I read your bios, and then we all say hello. So, sound good? So Jayse Hansen is a freelance designer and creative art director for print, web, and motion design. He currently specializes in fictional UI, FUI design, such as advanced computer displays, holograms, heads-up displays, and data design. He's worked on Spider-Man Homecoming, Disney's Big Hero 6, Ender's Game, and has contributed to mega franchises like Iron Man, The Avengers, Hunger Games, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Star Wars. Welcome. And Mary Poplin is a visual effects artist and the product specialist for Boris Effects. She specializes in match moving, paint, beauty work, and matte painting, and has worked on films such as The Last Airbender, Gulliver's Travels, and Jackass 3D. Mary consults with film studios and customers to provide expert training in Mocha planar tracking and the Boris Continuum and Sapphire plugin packages. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And I think we all know Andrew Kramer. He has helped After Effects users all over the world hone their VFX skills through his website video Copilot, and produced a set of plugins that push things even further creatively. He's the creator of title sequences for TV's Fringe and the film Star Trek, and has held production roles from visual effects artists to directing commercials and promos. So glad that you're here, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So, thanks everyone for joining us today. If you're here in the audience, we're going to be taking questions later, so I want you to think about what you'd like to ask our panelists. So keep that in mind. So let's get started. Let's start at the very beginning. Think about how did you get your start in VFX? So Jayse, how did you find your niche? You have such a distinctive look to your work.
Yeah, thanks. So I went about this a very roundabout way. I always loved films and stuff. I was like the one that would pause, the movies, and I would actually draw the frames and the composition. And I started drawing UIs that were in the in movies and stuff. And I'd always find like little Easter eggs or little extra things about the about the story or something. I thought that was pretty cool. And then I actually met a guy here at NAB, Mark Colleran, who did this kind of work as a living, and I'm like, that is a job? That's got to be the coolest job ever, I was so geeking out, and it took me a while because I was like, man, I'm not good at anything. I don't even know what program to use, all that kind of stuff. And then I was like, you know what? I think I could do this. So I was working on a corporate video for Intel, and I said, hey, could we put some like futuristic screens in here on the computers? And they went for it. I sent that to Mark Colleran, and I said, I know this sucks, but if you ever need any help, I'll work for free. I'll do anything, a little widget, whatever. And he ended up referring me my first gigs. So
That's awesome. How about you, Mary?
Okay, so it's kind of funny. I actually, I was an illustrator and a painter, and it's actually really funny because people will go to my website and they'll like tell me, oh my God, you actually like you paint, and it's like, yes, that's what I did. I started working on movie posters, and so I was like cleaning up movie posters and doing like all the art for that. And we had this art director on one of the first films I worked on where I was doing a lot of the marketing for it, and he was like, oh, I like your work, so how about you do some matte paintings and some color keys, which are usually something that you have to like break into, but he really believed in me. His name was Phil Cruden. I owe him a lot, right? And he was like, so try this. And then one of my production managers was this girl named Leslie Barker, and she was like, so you're good at that paint stuff. Here's what we need, though. We need you to do some paint work and start doing beauty work on all these renders. And so they sat me down in front of a program I had never touched before, Combustion. And I'd never touched it, and this was longer ago than I'm willing to actually admit. And, and so they sat me down, they're like, right, so here's this new program you've never touched, here's a bunch of shots, and they're all due at the end of the week, so good luck. And that led to, more matte paintings and more compositing, and here I am now. Eventually, a guy named Martin Brennan from Boris, Imagineer Systems at the time, with Mocha was like, hey, I really like your work, you're really good at talking to people, come work for us. So that's what I do now.
That's super cool. And I remember some of your very, very first video Copilot tutorials way back in the day, like the one with the baseball, the camera shake. Very, very early ones. How have things changed since then?
So, yeah, I would say that the tutorials have been getting a little bit worse, but we're working on that, right? No, actually, I would say that tutorials has helped me get more of the kind of work that I had always dreamed of doing, working on movies. And, you know, I've told this story before, but some of my tutorials, like visual effects and energy effects or whatever, you know, I got an email from J.J. Abrams and said, like, hey, I like your stuff, and, you know, maybe we could, like, work together. And I'm just like, oh, man, this is crazy. I'm being punked. But luckily I wasn't. And just from there, getting an opportunity to work on movies has inspired me even more, like being able to see what's possible. And like to piggyback off of what Jayse was saying, movies like Forrest Gump inspired me, and not, like, I don't even think I understood the movie when I watched it, but seeing how they integrated him into the old footage, and they did mouth replacements before, you know, before it was possible. They were doing some really amazing, like, crowd replacements, and that stuff it just was exciting that was possible. And so the sort of journey for me is making tutorials, and that's actually helped me get better and do more professional stuff.
That is super cool. And I'm actually really curious, when you're designing the kind of work that you're doing, in particular, Jayse, how do you go about creating that concept, or what's the foundation for one of those shots?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I always realize that some people have no idea what the hell UI is in film, right? So, and people are like, did you design like the robot or something? And I have to say, no, there was like a computer screen that was by the robot. That's what I did, you know? So it's basically any holograms or heads-up displays, you know, Iron Man type stuff, or in Star Wars, which I worked with. This fine gentleman right here did all the holograms for R2-D2 and BB-8 and stuff. And so to answer your question, yeah, the way I start is usually I try to get a sense of the story. So, because we're always using these to kind of further the story along. So trying to either read the script or watch if they've filmed anything and edit it together, really get a sense of what that is, what they're trying to accomplish, and then I'll draw it out. I usually have to draw it by hand. I try to get away with just going straight to the computer, but especially if it's a storytelling thing, I've got to almost storyboard it out in a way.
I've
right?
actually seen it. He's got a little notebook, a pen, does these like really good drawings, and like maps out, and they're like three-dimensional. And it just reminded me, like when we worked on Star Wars, there's shots in the movie that are less than 24 frames, and they have to convey a moment, a message, a feeling that quickly. And you know, like that's the challenge of the stuff that he does, like for all the type of, you know, sci-fi movies. You have to like tell a story. It's not just cool graphics.
Yeah, and it's in a way, it's, you know, we should do it very minimally because that would read the quickest, but we have to make it look advanced. Like it has to look super, you know, if it's Iron Man, it's got to be super advanced, right? So the challenge is, how do you make it look super complex, super advanced, and yet read in the 24 frames, the less than a second. So.
I think that's really interesting that you say that you have to draw it out first, and I think that's one of those things that speaks to how like you need to have foundational skills to be able to create this work, no matter what program you're making it in. That's really very interesting and cool.
Yeah, Mary was talking in the back about, you know, needing to really develop as an artist. I love that. I think that's exactly right. Versus trying to learn programs all the time. You know, you've got to develop your skill. I find trying to draw, and by the way, I draw horribly. It's really bad drawings, actually. But I allow myself to draw badly because, yeah, you're looking at like more the clarity of things. You know, it's going to be a stronger composition, a stronger design, versus just jumping into a program.
Yeah. At the same time, though, the technical side of this is actually an important aspect. And even though I'm from the software side, I totally get the art side of it as well. And you were also talking earlier about how you need to find that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. So you need to learn how to use the software, obviously, but you also need to understand that the software is going to adapt. It's going to change over time, and you need to be able to adapt with it. Like, you have to be able to learn how to use the various types of software to do the task you're trying to do. The task is important. The artistic part of that is important. The design part is important. But yeah, it's totally important to be able to know how to use the tools in the right way to get the job done on time.
And Andrew, you've actually been making tools. So how did that come about? How did you go from making tutorials to making products?
So a lot of what made me excited about making software was running into limitations or wishing there was a way to do something specifically. I think I was fresh off working on Star Trek 2009, and obviously famously a lot of cool lens flares, and I had been developing the plug-in optical flares. And that sort of journey of filming lens flares and analyzing them and trying to understand the science behind the physics, because the goal was always, how do you make it photographic? How do you make it look real? And the only way that would have come about was being able to work on a real production. And so for me, it's very important that I work on real design projects and movie projects. It helps me make better tutorials. It helps me understand what the software needs are so that it's very forward ideas and very innovative tech. We showed a plugin today that uses some really interesting techniques for volume rendering, and that kind of stuff came about because of a project we were working on, and we needed the ability to do that, and that just inspires, and it just kind of pushes forward that way.
Was there a moment where you said, "Oh, I'm going to have to do this myself"?
Almost daily. But for sure, you realize that there are just areas that just are blind spots, or maybe they're just real specific. I think with our first plugin, Twitch, it actually started out as a After Effects expression project, right? And to be fair, I didn't know how to make expressions properly. And I remember I had to create all the if-else statements for every possible state, because there's you could turn on some blur and some light and some different flicker types, but you had to have an if-else statement for every combination, like 1 and 3 or 2 and 4. And believe me, I didn't know what I was doing. And so when I finally found a real plugin developer, it was the funnest thing to say. I could completely stop worrying about how to accomplish it, and I could fully embrace just the idea. What about this? Could we do this? And then, our brilliant developers, they go in and they try to figure out the best way to do it. And then I'm always like, can we do it faster, though? It needs to be faster. I'm compositing. And that has just been the way that we roll.
That's super cool. So Mary, you have a real reputation as somebody who can solve really complex shots that other artists can't do. You're the person they'll call the red phone, we need Mary. How have you built that reputation?
I think I built that by interfacing with users. So obviously I work at a plugin company, and we interface with users often. And as a, sort of customer-facing person, I end up going to a lot of our meetings, a lot of our demos. I do a lot of our training content, and so we have a support contact, and so we just get people that's like, hey, can I talk to the Mary Poplin? I'd like to talk to the Mary Poplin, please, and which is hilarious. But so people have these shots that are honestly very difficult, and we have to sort of think outside the box. And the tool that I use the most is Mocha, and Mocha is one of those tools that it's not like other tools. It was like planar tracking before planar tracking was a buzzword. So because I'm decent at learning software and decent at sort of attacking problems from an artistic and a technical side, what I can usually do is I can look at what they're doing, and honestly, what most users are normally doing is overthinking it. They've the problem it's been something that they've been spinning their wheels on for so long that they don't know how to look at it anymore. So I don't even know if I get that reputation fairly, because I'm just a different perspective. I just have a very different perspective. But I often troubleshoot shots, and I think it's just the repetition of that over the past 8 years that's built that reputation.
Do you have one that you're particularly proud of that you just cracked it?
I do. It's actually on my demo list for this year. I had this shot that was driving me crazy. It was a blurry background, and it looked like it was all one plate, and it was really hard to track, and it was a close-up of a woman, and I wanted to take her out to put her back on top, because I wanted to make her ghostly and transparent and lovely. But like many shots, it's one of those things where you're like, well, we shot this, and this is the shot. We don't have a plate, we don't have a background plate, we don't have a guest, we don't have anything. So instead of using what I had been trying to do, which was try to track the whole thing, I did a guesstimate on a lens warp, and then I split it, this side and this side, because I realized that instead of actually being one plane moving behind them, I figured out that it was actually two planes, and it was so blurry that you couldn't tell that it was two planes.
Aha.
So figuring that out made it to where I could build it up piece by piece, and I was able to rebuild the shot from scratch and actually do it to where you can you can actually overlay the person back and forth, and it looks like seamless, which is, I'm really proud of that.
That's super cool.
And it's invisible. No one would ever know.
Yeah, some of the best VFX, the way it's the best is that no one ever sees it. You actually are somewhat of an exception that you're doing stuff that's visible and noticeable as VFX. It's not always seamless. It's meant to be seen. Do you have a shot you're particularly proud of?
Oh, man. I love a lot of the Big Hero 6 stuff because it was an animated film, and I never thought I'd work on animated film. The Star Wars stuff I'm really proud of, just because that was a crazy experience, and that was my bucket list film. Like, I was chasing it down. I'm like, who's working on this? I don't even know who.
Outside my house, I'm like,
yeah, it was like, Andrew, come on. So, but I mean, we got into there, and I remember. So we did all those holograms and everything in Element 3D. Like, I built a lot of it. We built a lot of it in Cinema 4D. Then we used Element to render it inside of After Effects. And I was really proud of that, because I remember when I came, I go, so Andrew, are we going to be using Element for everything on this? And he was like, no, man, just do your normal, if you use C4D, let's do that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be spending months next to this guy. I am going to learn Element 3D from him. We've got to do this in Element. And we did, and it was so great. And I also was able to see kind of his process in terms of, I mean, whatever you think you know about Andrew, like, he is so much funnier in real life, and he is so much, like, he's brilliant with After Effects. So it was really nice to, because usually if I have a problem, I look up a tutorial that Andrew did, but having him right next to me is much better, much better. So that's pretty much what we did. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun, and Jayse he taught me just the value of so many small details that just create depth. Like, when you look at something and you see the basic idea of the shot and you think, okay, that looks cool, but why does it look great? And when I see him putting in the intricacy of the lines and the weight of the lines and the small little details and the tags, it just gave me a greater appreciation for that whole UI design stuff, that the amount of work that goes into any one of those shots is, I mean, it really is a work of art. So
well, and they're beautiful. They're really, really awesome.
Yeah, that's some gorgeous stuff. I'm really curious about Big Hero 6, actually. What's different about doing VFX for animation versus live action?
So animation, I get started a lot earlier in the process. So I'm on my third animated film now, starting next week, which is really cool. But yeah, the process is kind of like, they do a lot more concepting and a lot more like exploration. Almost like, you could almost go like a whole year of just exploring and making the world and making, I feel like they really understand design, animators, and because they're so involved in that, like even to the director level, really are, they value design so much, so they will really geek out on all the stuff that you do. A lot of times on films, sometimes you'll do stuff and you don't get any feedback or whatever, but on animated ones, you definitely feel the love, and it's also feels like a really small, even if it's Disney animation, feels like a small little crew. It feels like a family, so it's pretty cool.
Well, and like with animation, there's a lot more previs too. So like there's
Yeah.
like just so much. So there's so much prep.
Yeah, I feel like my stuff can influence their stuff, and their stuff influences mine a lot more because it's so liquid. It hasn't been filmed. I don't have to put it into a plate that already has a camera move or no camera move. Especially for holograms, you want camera moves to really feature, like a three-dimensional thing. And a lot of plates, sometimes we'll get them, they'll be static, locked off, and you won't be able to tell it's a hologram very well. So with animated ones, yeah, you can kind of, hey, can we swing this camera around? It's a lot easier to do. So.
Yeah, you were going to jump in there?
Yeah, I was just thinking about when you work with different people, you just learn different things in different ways, and I think there's so much to be said about finding people that do different stuff than you and finding a way to work with them. The style that they go after, maybe it's not your style, but you're able to just see their brilliance and the way that they focus on something and you always walk away with just a way better amount of skill. And you know, it's been like with working with Jayse and with working with people who just do completely different things. You know, so like I would recommend finding projects that maybe are outside of your comfort zone, and you know, work with people that know what they're doing, and you know, you'll just learn a lot.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to jump in there with one little small thing. Because I end up interacting with a lot of users, I have a lot of new users, and they'll always ask me, like, you know, how do I get started? Like, what do I do? And I'm always like, find people you really like, and then just make stuff with them. But make stuff with other people, because that collaboration part is key.
That's a really great piece of advice. And this also leads to something else I really wanted to talk to you about, which is how you balance that sort of user-facing stuff where you're actually part of you're coming in, you're doing training, you're part of the industry, with the artistic work you're doing, and with the VFX side of it. So is it more one or the other? Do you find yourself going one direction?
You know, it's not one or the other. What it is it'll be like for the 40 hours a week during the day that I actually work on like customer-facing stuff, I do that, and then when I do visual effects, I kind of put in another 10 to 20 hours a week doing that stuff. That's kind of how it works out. Because, you know, I work full-time and I really enjoy my work, but sometimes I do want to do like some extra creative stuff. So what I do is I have to make time for it, carve that out of other spaces. But if I didn't do it, I wouldn't maintain the skills that I need to do the other part of my gig, which is training people, like you were saying earlier about how you need to do real-world work to maintain your skill set, and you absolutely do. Like, there is no substitute for working on a real project with real challenges.
Yeah, there's so much talent out there. Like, I'm constantly blown away by the work that I see on like Instagram and places, and I just feel that just inspires me, motivates me more. Like, I want to learn more about this, I want to learn more about that. And if you stop, you know, learning and being inspired, then you know you'll kind of just be stuck at that level. And you always want to, you know, you're never gonna have fun if you stop that place. And you know, so I love to just be inspired by people. And you know, there's a funny story. I was doing some research for a recent plugin that we did for Orb, right, planets and things like that. And I had stumbled upon a demo reel for a big movie, and it had like space and planets, and it was amazing. As an ILM designer, and I was looking at it, he had like a little breakdown of the shot, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I was looking at his YouTube and whatever, I'm just like looking at his previous videos, and then down there I see some like video Copilot tutorials. I'm just like, this guy is inspiring me right now. That's how it all works. So.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I got to go to a trailer house the other day, and I have to edit all my own videos. I am not the best editor in the world, but I got to go see a bunch of new cuts of trailers, and I mean like trailers you would have seen, you know? And the way they do it, like they'd run several different versions and they'd be totally different stories of the same story, like really back to back and super tight with like genius like music choices. And I was just like, yeah, these guys are really good at what they do. I'm gonna try to just glean as much as I can from that.
Yeah. One of the things, I was just talking to a friend of mine about how airline safety videos are like that, and that every airline's got a totally different one. They have exactly the same script, and yet they're always trying to tell a different story. And it's really interesting to see people take the same material and twist it in different directions.
Absolutely.
That's fun stuff. And how do you balance things? Because you seem to be doing about 12 different things. Is it this, do you have a weekly schedule? Do you bounce back and forth between Video Copilot and working on movies?
I have only advice on what not to do. I would say that it's always changing, because I do production work, and sometimes I have to focus on that solely. You know, for the past 18 months, we've been doing heavy Video Copilot stuff and development and tools. So it's, you know, it's just a matter of having goals for the year and looking at it a little bit more big picture, because you can do day to day, but you want to say like, okay, I want to be able to get to this point, and which is something I'm famously not that great at. And so to have some sort of guideline for where I would like to get to, that's helped me so much more in this past year and a half, 2 years, where I've really tried to focus in on my schedule to know that I'm being more productive. Because you can always be busy, but you want to be productive.
And how have you seen the industry changing over the last few years?
I can say for film industry, I think, you know, when I got in, everybody warned me about it, that, you know, you're going to break up with your girlfriend, you're going to never sleep, you're gonna ruin relationships and everything. And so I kind of avoided that, but I've found that a lot of companies are avoiding it too. Like they're starting to respect life a little more. Cantina is one of the group I do a lot of work with, and they if you're there at 8 o'clock, they're like, "What are you doing? Go home, have a life. Weekends, go home, do something else." Because they know you come back with a different point of view. You come back fresher. You come back, more inspired and excited, and everybody then wants to work there too because it's like this cool place. So I've seen that with different places, kind of all coming around. And I think that's just super healthy. I think I would have burnt out if it was like that for me, and I just kind of circumvented my way around it and tried to make it like so that it's actually an enjoyable, fun, everyday kind of job. It's hard work, but it's definitely like a good thing. It's a healthy thing. So
I feel like that speaks to some of the democratization of visual effects in general. It's easier to produce on cheaper machines with less expensive software. The barrier to entry is much lower. You can have smaller houses that get like amazing work at competitive costs. So what you're seeing is a lot more people with these sustainable studios at sustainable lifestyles at sustainable paces, and they're doing amazing work because they're fresh enough to actually do the work. So and we're all just making the tools that make it easier, right? Like that's the thing.
That's such a positive thing to hear. It's so nice. The industry's changing to be better to artists. Oh, that's good news.
Well, I feel too artists are actually getting a little bit better at advocating for themselves as well. That's also
absolutely.
a big thing.
That's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen a real change there?
Yeah. I mean, I think people are kind of waking up. I think at first it was like just everybody was so eager to do stuff, and now it's kind of like, hey, we can still do this. We don't have to like absolutely kill ourselves. We still kill ourselves, but we still go home and we have a good relationship with the people that matter in our lives too. I mean, that's at the end of the day the most important thing. So
yeah, I feel like people are realizing that 2 weeks crunch is fine. 2 months crunch is starting to push it. Like maybe that's bad management. Maybe.
I've also seen. I mean. I'm super proud about After Effects this year winning the award because when I started, I was really confused about what to dive into. Like, it was combustion, was it? And then people told me, no, you want to do film, you got to learn Inferno. And I was like, oh, cool, sign me up. How do I get that? And they're like, yeah, it's kind of like $500,000 hardware and all this stuff attached to it, and you'll never actually be able to learn it. And so I was really confused when I was first starting out. And finally, somebody told me, look, just learn After Effects because then you can get a job. The secret thing about these companies is that they're all using After Effects as well. So if you learn that, you can get a job in there. And so now I feel like, I mean, it's a little more straightforward. It's freaking After Effects. It's Illustrator, Cinema 4D. It's like such a good path. They all work together so well, and I feel like that's great. And then there's a lot more training and stuff that's being supported.
Well, yeah, you talk about training because that's your bailiwick. It's my bailiwick. It's what we all do. So like, the training is also part of that democratization process. It allows people that would have to have gone to film school, people that would have had to have like invested a lot of time into learning, people who would have had to work their way up. They actually know because of people like you, because of people like us, and that's actually a really wonderful thing too.
That's something I've really noticed changing. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I think there's so much great content out there that you can learn from other people, and maybe it's just an overwhelming willingness to share. Like, I think people are just so open to, they post something cool. Oh, hey, how'd you do that? Oh, here's an idea. I'll make a tutorial. Like, just I'll make a tutorial. I'll show you my process. That kind of casual love for the craft and willingness, I think it just helps everybody. And I know I've certainly learned from tutorials online and seen what people are doing. When we do our tutorials, we know there's a lot of content out there, and we want to try to create stuff that is, just unique and maybe tackles something in a different way, just so people can get a different perspective on something.
Oh.
They can't hear that, so just assume there was some really obnoxious, loud announcement, and it all shocked us, but you can't hear it.
Yeah, they want our attention, please.
It's like those earthquake videos. People are like...
Yeah. It really does seem like there's just so much out there now to learn on your own in a way that there wasn't back in the day. So then how did you get started before all that was out there? Like, what brought you to tutorials?
So one interesting thing about Video Copilot is we started in 2005, and that was before YouTube, to just give you like a little bit of a... And I think back then we had to host our own videos on like a private server, I think 1 month. Like, it was good and bad. I was like, oh man, look, everybody's watching that video. And then I got my bill for the hosting. It was $5,000.
Oh.
And like, I didn't, that was, it was rough. But, seeing the change of like YouTube and the ability to sort of present that content has made it easier. But in the beginning, I think there were places like forums like Creative Cow, which I was, a part of that group. And, again, there was just tutorials, written ones. I know Jayse he's done one of the very first video tutorials that was online. And I think we all used like Flash, I think enabled us to export video that could be easily streamed. And, I think maybe Flash gets enough credit, but I think that really helped create a place for video on the internet. And I wasn't that good at looking at a written tutorial. Because you'd see, 10 steps and it's like a 45-minute process, and you're like, okay, something is missing between this sentence and this sentence. And for me, whenever I do a tutorial, I always start it out blank screen. Restart, make a new composition. I make everything from scratch. Sometimes people make fun of me because I go up and I say, all right, click edit, duplicate, rather than hitting, Control D or something like that. And the reason is because I want people to see the process. So whether you're a professional or this is the first tutorial that you run into, I want to make sure you don't hit that roadblock in the first 1 minute and not able to continue because I've done some shortcut. And I'm not perfect on that, but I really try to show you the process all the way through because that was what inspired me to see it.
Yeah, and we think we should also give a shout out to early days of After Effects training, like Brian Maffitt's VHS tapes.
Absolutely.
I had those. There were a lot of resources, but it's totally different now.
Well, they were harder to get.
Yeah, that's true.
You had to have a VHS player.
and
you also had to know where to get them.
And now, like, I went to film school, and now we see so many people just coming straight in who've learned everything they know online. And it really does seem like one of the best things with this community is there aren't a lot of secrets. And I think it's because it's celebrated to show off that you figured out how to do something cool, to show off your techniques. Like, it's a way to make a name for yourself. I mean...
I think you also feel like I'm totally self-taught, right? I didn't have money for school. I grew up pretty poor, so I was like, all right, I'm doing it through books and through Linda and like all the online training and stuff. And when you have received all this good stuff from people, you feel like you want to give back. Like it's your duty almost to give back, and also bring the next people along with you. So.
Yeah, I learned how to use combustion with a book. That was it. No videos, no nothing, nobody sitting next to me showing me how to do it. A book.
This might be a good time to open this up to the audience. Is there anyone who has a question I'd like to ask the panel? If you have anybody, Michelle has the microphone. Anyone with a question? Wait, you see somebody over there?
I have some questions for the audience.
Uh-oh.
No.
We're gonna start asking.
Yeah, you in the blue shirt? No.
She has a question.
What do you guys end up doing to help work through a creative block?
That's a very interesting question. So a lot of times what I do is I ditch the project that I'm working on and start from scratch, or I'll work on a sister shot and then see if there's something there that is a breakthrough for the shot that I'm working on. And then I'll go back to that and see if the techniques apply. If not, like, I cannot recommend enough the simple technique of getting up, going on a walk for 15 minutes, and coming back and looking at it. Or actually just getting some sleep if you're in a place where you can't.
You will solve so many things while you're asleep.
Yeah, I think, if you look at the problem, try to figure out why is the problem happening, I think you go to a more fundamental level and say, hey, is this because the timing is off, or what's not reading about it? And I think if you understand why it's not working, simplify it down, say, okay, it's not reading, so let's try to say, what is the simplest way we can get this to work? and then start attacking it more, creatively. And sometimes the creative, the look or the style frame can get you kind of hung up a little bit, and you don't think about what you're really trying to convey. And so just pulling back just a little bit, and then you can regroup.
Oh, I have actually a silly one. It's not silly, but it's a valid technique that you use when you're painting. But if you have a design problem in your shot and you're trying to figure out why it doesn't look right or where it doesn't look right, in After Effects you can use like a little adjustment layer. You can actually reflect it or transform it, flip it upside down. That is actually a really good way to look at a shot. It sounds silly, but it is not, because it gives you a new perspective to look at the composition, the perspective, the lighting, and make sure everything's lining up. And literally just one different visual perspective can help a lot.
Yeah, on that note, have you ever exported a video and watched it and it felt completely different than in the timeline when you watch it? Weird thing, but I've done it. Or watch it on my phone, or just watch it on a different TV screen,
I love those. I do the same thing. I'll also duplicate the design. So like if it's in Illustrator, I'll duplicate the artboard a bunch of times, and I'll iterate. And I used to iterate by saving different versions, but if you have them all together where you can see them all, then you can go back and say, I like this from here, I like this from here, I like this from here, and you begin to kind of just become unstuck a little bit.
It's good advice. Any more questions from the audience? I think we've got one over here.
Yeah, I was just wondering, besides the technical, the software, have you found any tips or tricks for things like ergonomics or like taking a walk, but any tools or like chairs or special mice or anything that you've found that's helped you physically or emotionally in the long process of like a long edit or a long...
Standing desk. I have a sit-stand desk. That's really nice. And I use a Cintiq, so I'm constantly changing input modalities, right? I'll do a mouse, I'll do a Cintiq, I'll use AstroPad on my iPad, and it basically becomes a little mini Cintiq for your laptop or whatever computer. And so I'm just constantly just trying to switch it up physically. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was absolutely going to say Wacom tablets. Like, absolutely, they make things a lot easier.
I just kind of make sure I'm near a window, just in case I need a... No.
Do you have another question out here? Anyone else? Oh, right here.
When you're designing more of like a really complicated UI system, or you're getting into a design and you find it you really need to draw attention to that one area, do you have any tips, tricks, or techniques that you kind of go to really make that area really clean and stand out still? And then follow-up question, what's your favorite Easter egg you have ever hidden in a UI?
Oh, favorite Easter egg, yeah. Okay, so first question, that's absolutely like probably the hardest part of the job, right? Is directing people's eyes to that one part when there's all this clutter everywhere else. So you may notice like a lot of our UIs are super desaturated, or they're kind of monochromatic for the most part. That's why, because that one accent color is what we're going to use to draw your eye. Also, the animation of it. So I'll actually animate like little boxes or little things that basically animate to that part, and then that part highlights. So it's just always like leading you, and then it does the payoff, and that always helps a lot. So one of the things, like if a design is going wrong and it just looks too cluttered or whatever, you can just make it all black and white, just for a while, right? Then look at it, then start bringing back colors very, very selectively. Also, lots of negative space, white space, around that object will help a lot as well.
Exactly.
Your Easter egg question, though.
Oh, the Easter egg. Okay, favorite Easter egg. There's a lot. I always put my name in somewhere. You know what? Actually, what's funny? Can we say this? I mean,
this is alleged, okay?
Unconfirmed.
All right. In Star Wars, there's a scene with the Starkiller base hologram, and it pans up to it. Really beautiful zoom up into it, becomes really big. And I think the first time we showed it, JJ said, I hope you hid all your names in there. And we hadn't. We're like, oh my God, we didn't even think of that. We were like working so hard, So we went back, and of course, you got to put it in a certain language because it's not English, right? So, but if you look really closely, you'll see the team is all in there.
Yeah, I tend to hide my name and stuff too sometimes, but it's usually initials, and it's usually like where you can't see it, like tree branches or something.
I once hit a pancake recipe in After Effects.
Wonderful.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
It's in 14.2. All right, we got a couple questions. There's one back there. Oh, there's one here.
So, me? Can you hear me?
Nope.
So if you're working with the client and you think you did the greatest job and then the client looks at it and says it's not looking real, how do you deal with that?
You just tell him he's wrong.
So, you go.
No, that's all. No, what I would say is, a serious answer to that question is, maybe just sort of inquire, like, what do you think is not working? Like, sort of get them to sort of commit to things that you can actually adapt. Like, sometimes the hardest notes are, it's not working. It's like, oh, well, okay, well, I'll fix that. Having more concrete things to, and I've learned to get better at that as well. With, when I work with my team, it's, the more clarity you can have, even just ideas on what might be causing this sort of inconsistency. And so if you can help them commit to saying, like, well, maybe it's the background is just, not looking, or the edges, and that way you can actually focus in on making a change so the next version comes up, and the next version, and maybe by version, 20, you'll have solved the problem, and hopefully you're working by the hour.
What I like to do is I like to, if they start getting fussy about shots, I like to set up like 3 to 5 versions, because usually what fussy is, I have found, and this is not always true, but sometimes they just want to feel involved in the process. And that's the nicest way to say it. Sometimes it's just that they want their say. But usually it's because they want to feel involved in the process. So whatever you can do to bring them in as a creative partner is really helpful. And try to avoid having them use words like, I need it to pop more. It needs to sing or zing a little bit more. It needs to be just 10% more awesome. Like, you got like, oh, so do you mean you want it saturated? Do you mean you want to, like, bring out the sharpness and the detail in this area? Work with me. You are my creative partner.
Yeah, there's a great saying, people support what they help build. And so if you can involve them in it and make them feel a part of it, it goes a long way towards getting those things finalized.
Before there was memes, right? I remember reading memes. Maybe this was like 15 years ago. And one of them was like tales from production. And it was just like little anecdotes from random, designers or people doing work. And it was very early in the industry. And so it was things like, we'll fix it in post and stuff like that. And one of them was just like, oh, hey, can we kind of make that smaller but bigger in the frame? And you're like, yeah. And then the guy says, so I hit a few buttons and showed him the same thing. And then this one crazy one that just made me laugh. There was a production person that said, okay, it's a film of like a motorcycle shot, and the guy's like, oh, this is great, but I want this angle this way. Like, I don't want to look at the motorcycle this way. I want it to be this other way. And he, it's filmed, and he's like, oh, well, we could do it, but if we do it, then we'll see the camera and the lighting and all the equipment, so maybe we shouldn't do it. And he's like, oh, right.
That's great. All right, one more.
Hello. So it feels like programs are starting to overlap with their functions that they're capable of. For example, After Effects can do a lot more 3D thanks to Element. But if you see like a job posting or something that says you should know 3D, and you're kind of like an Element expert, but maybe that you haven't touched other aspects that are not available in Element, how do you kind of solve that problem of helping people understand that you can learn the program that needs to do the one thing that this doesn't do? And how do you like market that you're willing to get over the things that the program might not be able to do, things like that. It's becoming muddy, and you can't really say like, I know After Effects. It doesn't mean something as specific as it might have used to, right? So is that a problem, or what could you say about that?
I think what stands out more is what you can do. Like, I've seen people do stuff with Element that I'm thinking, how do they do this? Like, I'm not even exactly sure. And, some job postings and things like that, they're just looking to sort of raise the threshold, perhaps, just to make it easier to manage the candidates and things like that. But I think if you can show people what you're capable of, producers, at the end of the day, just want to see the work and make it look great, right? And there's so many great tools that can do a lot of similar things, like you said. And maybe they have a certain pipeline, and you're working with other people, and maybe there's a reason for that. But as far as an individual project, an artist, it all comes down to what you can do fully. And so if you can always add more tools to your own skill set, and that's always going to be better. But at the end of the day, that's what matters.
I have some complimentary advice to add to that, which is you need to market yourself, right? And the way that you market yourself, I use tools like LinkedIn, and by the way, like 95% of people who hire people also use LinkedIn. So if your LinkedIn is not beefed up with a picture and what you can do and a story of who you are with keywords key to the job you are interested in your story. I'm not joking. Like, that is one of the ways that you can really help yourself. But the way that you really need to help yourself, like you said, you show, not tell, right? You say, I'm a problem solver. Here's a problem I solved. And you talk about the story of the problem you solved and why, with the skills that are relevant to the job that you're going for, okay? Because the tool matters, but the tool doesn't matter as much as your ability, and your ability to crack that code.
And also, you probably always heard this, where you show what you want to do, right? So, but that was, for me, a big problem when I wanted to get into this particular niche. On my website, I had all my artwork, and everybody kept trying to hire me for like web design or other things, and I finally had to basically narrow it down. I just had 2 projects, because that's all I'd ever done. And I took off everything else, and that's when I started getting hired for that type of work. So sometimes just 2 projects is enough if they're showing your passion and your ability. So.
All right, we've got one final question way in the back.
I'm Bernard from the Philippines. This is for Andrew. Man, your plugins are phenomenal. We've been using Element 3D, Saber Tools, and we've been optical players. What are you working on next?
Well, this guy's not a plant, I swear. He's like, what's your next commercially available plugin? Oh, well, thank you for the question. But to answer your question, we've been working on a bunch of different tools, and I think one of the things that is fun about Video Copilot is that we work on stuff that we're excited about, things that, things that we want to create. We don't necessarily have, third quarter schedules and plans. We want to just make, what's an innovative tech? Let's create something new and different. And right now we are working on a new plugin called Nebula 3D. We actually showed it at the Adobe booth earlier.
It's cool.
And it's for doing real 3D volumetrics and VDBs inside of After Effects. And that, that kind of a thing that can help the compositing process. It can help you during the final rendering of your scene. Happens to be something I'm actually working on for a professional project, and sort of that inspired, making it a little bit easier, since the render times on VDBs can be really, really slow. So we've just been chugging away, but this one actually is really close, so thanks.
So I want to just wrap up with one big question, which is, what do you see as the future of VFX? Where do you see this industry going?
That's a big question. I just know my little niche of the world, and so for user interfaces and stuff with VR and augmented reality, that's really opened up a lot of interest in user interfaces that are spatial. So they're surrounding you. Your applications are things that other people can see. They have a side that you can see behind a user interface. You can see the side of the user interface, and that's a lot of what we do in film, right? Like with the heads-up displays or the holograms. And so that's what I'm most excited about, is a lot more of that type of thing. I'm getting pinged by a lot of real companies and to do that kind of thing, and that's what I'm excited about.
So for me, I think automation is key, right? The more technologically advanced we get, the more tedious tasks get just put on the click a button and it's done burner, okay? We have things like, automatic tracking of scenes using camera trackers and rebuilding things. NVIDIA has been showing this automatic matte painting kind of stuff. And while I feel that it's not final, I feel like it's a good place for users to start. And I think artists need to start focusing on honing what their special edge can be. That and we got to continue to build up the connections we have amongst each other, because the tools are getting so good that we need to build our reputations right? We're going to have to start continuing to build our artistic skills and keeping our reputations up in order to stay relevant in the industry.
I'm going to update my LinkedIn profile. So to answer that, I think virtual production is something that is really becoming more prominent, and I think it's going to become a lot easier and a lot more available. And sometimes you think, oh, virtual production, it's this really big, complicated thing, but I think it's as simple as maybe blocking out a scene, figuring out the geography of something you're going to have visual effects in later. And if you could do it on your iPhone and you could storyboard visually out a scene, that brings the post-production process earlier into the game, helps you figure out the things before you run into them. It helps you know what you need. And even from sets, from lenses, from lighting, you know more about the post-production, and that way you get a more true-to-life version of what you originally envisioned. So I'm sure we'll see a lot more of that.
Great. It's exciting stuff. So I want to thank all three of our panelists for joining us today, and thank all of you for joining us. A round of applause for them. Thanks so much.
Thank you.